Have you ever felt invisible? Like you're working your hardest, but the world just doesn't see you? That's how 24-year-old Eleanor Vance felt every single day, drowning in debt and despair. She was just a waitress in a forgotten diner, serving coffee to strangers. But one rainy Tuesday, one of those strangers was watching her every move. He wasn't just anyone. He was a reclusive billionaire with a hidden agenda. Eleanor had no idea that her simple act of kindness in the face of cruelty was a test, and that by passing it, she wasn't just about to get a bigger tip. She was about to have her entire life rewritten forever. The rain fell on Chicago's West Loop in relentless gray sheets, blurring the neon sign of the Silver Spoon Diner into a hazy puddle of red and blue. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of frying bacon, stale coffee, and the quiet desperation of a Tuesday morning. For Eleanor Vance, or Ellie as her few friends called her, this was the scent of her life. At 24, Ellie wore her exhaustion like a second uniform. Her once bright hazel eyes were shadowed with sleepless nights, and her shoulders carried the invisible weight of a mountain of debt. It wasn't her debt, not really. It was the crushing aftermath of her mother's failed battle with cancer 2 years ago, and now the ever-growing medical bills for her younger brother, Liam. Liam, at only 10 years old, was fighting a rare autoimmune disease that required treatments his part-time cashier, sister, and waitress by night Ellie could never hope to afford. So she worked. She poured coffee, mopped floors, and smiled through the grit of her teeth, praying for a miracle in the form of a $20 tip. Today was particularly bleak. Her shift had started with a burst pipe in the women's restroom, followed by a family of 6 who let their kids turn sugar packets into confetti and then complained about the service. Her feet ached, a dull throb that radiated up her legs. She glanced at the clock. 9:17 a.m. 9 more hours to go. That's when he walked in. He wasn't the usual type for the Silver Spoon. Her regulars were construction workers with calloused hands, office clerks on a budget, and the lonely elderly who came for the company as much as the food. This man was different. He wore a simple, dark gray woolen coat that, despite its lack of a designer label, hung on his frame with an air of quiet expense. His hair was a distinguished salt and pepper, neatly trimmed, and his face was etched with lines that spoke not of hardship, but of intense focus and long hours in a boardroom. He looked to be in his late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He chose a booth in the far corner, a spot usually avoided because of the draft from the window. He didn't look at the menu. When Ellie approached, a notepad in hand, he simply said in a low, calm voice, "Black coffee and toast, dry." "Sure thing," Ellie said, forcing a warmth she didn't feel into her voice. As she turned to place the order, she felt his eyes on her. It wasn't a creepy stare, not the kind she was used to fending off from late-night drunks. It was analytical. He was watching her the way a scientist might observe a specimen, with a detached, unnerving curiosity. She shook it off. She was tired and letting her imagination run wild. The diner buzzed with its usual low-grade chaos. A customer at the counter, a stocky man in a wrinkled suit named Mr. Henderson, was loudly complaining that his eggs were too runny. "I said over medium, not over easy. Are you deaf, girl?" he barked at Chloe, the other waitress on duty, who looked close to tears. Ellie stepped in smoothly. "I'm so sorry about that, Mr. Henderson. Let me get that fixed for you right away." She took the plate before Chloe could crumble, giving her friend a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder as she passed. In the kitchen, she told Sal, the cook, to refire the order, absorbing his grumbled curses with the patience of a saint. She delivered the new plate with a smile. "Here you are, sir. Hope that's much better." Henderson just grunted and dug in. "No thank you. No acknowledgement. Just entitlement." From the corner booth, the man with the gray coat watched the entire exchange, his expression unreadable. He took a slow sip of his coffee. The morning dragged on. Ellie refilled coffees, cleared plates, and wiped down sticky tables. All the while, she was acutely aware of the silent observer in the corner. He had finished his toast an hour ago, but his coffee cup remained, and he seemed content to just sit and watch the dreary theater of the diner unfold. Around 11 a.m., an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable came in, her hands trembling slightly as she held on to her walker. She was a regular, a widow who lived on a meager pension. She always ordered the senior special, a single pancake and a cup of tea. Today, after she'd finished her meal, she fumbled in her worn-out purse, her face growing pale. "Oh, dear," she whispered, her voice trembling. I seem to have left my wallet at home. I am so terribly sorry." Chloe, already stressed from Mr. Henderson, looked flustered. Well, you can maybe come back and pay later?" But Ellie knew Mrs. Gable lived 3 bus transfers away. The journey would be an ordeal. Before Chloe could say anything else, Ellie pulled a crumpled $5 bill from the small pocket of her apron, part of a rare, generous tip she'd been saving for Liam's prescription copay. She handed it to Chloe. "It's on me," she said quietly, so only Chloe and Mrs. Gable could hear. "Don't you worry about a thing, Mrs. Gable. It's a pleasure to have you here." The old woman's eyes welled up with tears. "Oh, bless your heart, dearie, you are too kind. Just be safe getting home," Ellie said, her own financial worries screaming in the back of her mind. $5 was $5. It was half an hour of her life. She turned away from the grateful woman, and her gaze accidentally met the man in the corner. For the first time, his expression had changed. The detached observation was gone, replaced by a flicker of something else. Something she couldn't quite decipher. Interest? Approval? She couldn't be sure. He looked down at his empty cup, breaking the contact. A few minutes later, he signaled for his check. Ellie brought it over. The total was $4.75. He laid a $10 bill on the table. "Keep the change," he said, his voice still low and even. He stood, put on his coat, and walked out into the rain without another word. Ellie picked up the bill, a small wave of relief washing over her. The tip more than covered what she'd given Mrs. Gable. As she cleared the table, she noticed something else. Tucked under the salt shaker was a sleek, black leather wallet. Her heart sank. The man must have forgotten it. It looked expensive, the kind of wallet that held more than just a $10 bill. Her first instinct, a dark whisper born of desperation, was to look inside. What if there was enough cash to cover Liam's medication for the month? Who would know? She crushed the thought instantly, shame washing over her. She couldn't be that person. She wouldn't. Picking it up, she ran to the door and peered out into the rain. But the street was empty. The mysterious man was gone. The weight of the wallet in her apron pocket felt like a lead brick. For the next hour, every time her hand brushed against it, a jolt of anxiety shot through her. It was a tangible reminder of a moral crossroads she stood at, a place where desperation and integrity were locked in a bitter fight. Her shift was a blur of faces and orders, but her mind was elsewhere. She replayed the scene in her head. The man's observant eyes, his quiet demeanor. He didn't seem like the type to be careless. Could he have left it on purpose? A test? The idea was absurd, something out of a movie. Real life was messier, more random. He was probably just a forgetful, wealthy man who was now frantically searching for his lost property. During her 15-minute break, she huddled in the cramped employee closet that smelled of bleach and despair. She took out the wallet. It was made of soft, supple leather, with no logo, the epitome of understated luxury. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The dark whisper returned. "Just look. Just see what's inside. No one is watching." She took a deep breath, steeling herself, and opened the main compartment. Her eyes widened, but not for the reason she expected. There was barely any cash. A 20, 2 5s, and a few ones. Less than $35. It was a shock. A man who wore a coat that probably cost more than her rent carried less cash than she did on a good tip day. But then she saw the credit cards. They were a matte black, heavy and metallic. An American Express Centurion card, the mythical Black Card, and several others of a similar elite caliber. Tucked into a side slot was a single business card. It was thick, cream-colored stock with elegantly embossed lettering. Arthur Ainsworth Chairman, Ainsworth Enterprises. Beneath the name was a phone number and an address on Wacker Drive in the heart of Chicago's financial district. A world of glass towers and billion-dollar deals, a universe away from the Silver Spoon Diner. Ainsworth. The name rang a faint bell. She'd probably seen it in the business section of the paper while wrapping fish and chips. Ainsworth Enterprises was a massive, multinational conglomerate with interests in technology, real estate, and private equity. It wasn't just a company, it was an empire. And the man who had been silently sipping coffee in her section was its king. A wave of nausea hit her. This wasn't just a rich man's wallet. It belonged to one of the most powerful and reclusive billionaires in the country. A man known for his ruthless business acumen and for disappearing from public life after a family tragedy years ago. The test theory no longer seemed so absurd. A man like Arthur Ainsworth didn't forget his wallet. Her shift finally ended at 7 p.m. The rain had softened to a miserable drizzle. Every bone in her body ached. Her friend Chloe, seeing the turmoil on Ellie's face, pulled her aside as they were clocking out. "You okay, Elle? You've been a million miles away ever since that guy left his wallet." "I'm fine," Ellie lied, forcing a weak smile. "Just tired. Did you know?" "Look inside?" Chloe asked, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. Ellie's silence was answer enough. "So? Was it loaded?" Chloe pressed, her eyes wide with a vicarious thrill. "Enough to get Liam that new specialist Dr. Evans was talking about?" The question was a punch to the gut. The thought had already slithered through Ellie's mind. A man like Ainsworth wouldn't even notice a few $1,000s missing from his accounts. For him, it would be a rounding error. For Liam, it could be the difference between a life of chronic pain and a chance at a normal childhood. "There wasn't much cash," Ellie said, her voice hollow. "But that's not the point, Chloe." "Isn't it?" Chloe retorted, her usual bubbly demeanor replaced by a fierce pragmatism born from watching her friend suffer. "The world isn't fair, Ellie. Guys like that are playing a different game. Taking a little something to save your brother, that's not stealing. That's justice." Ellie appreciated her friend's loyalty, but her words made her skin crawl. It was the same logic she'd been fighting within herself all day. She shook her head, clutching the wallet in her pocket. "I can't. It's not who I am." "It's who you might have to be," Chloe said softly, her words hanging in the damp air. Ellie walked home, the city lights smearing across wet pavement. Her apartment was a tiny third-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that had long given up on gentrification. The building's hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and damp carpet. Inside, her brother Liam was on the couch, sketching in a notebook, a blanket pooled around his thin frame. His face, usually pale and listless, lit up when he saw her. "Ellie, you're home!" "Hey, buddy," she said, her exhaustion melting away as she knelt beside him. "How was your day? Did Mrs. Peterson come by?" "Yeah, we did homework. And look!" He held up his sketchbook. It was a fantastical drawing of a dragon with shimmering iridescent scales, soaring over a city of crystal towers. Despite his physical frailty, Liam had a boundless imagination and a raw, untutored talent for art. It was a gift he shared with Ellie, whose own sketchbooks, filled with charcoal portraits and poignant cityscapes, were hidden away in a dusty box under her bed. A relic of a dream she'd had to abandon when she dropped out of art school to care for him. "Wow, Liam, that's incredible," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He's beautiful." Later that night, as Liam slept, a racking cough occasionally disturbing his rest, Ellie sat at her small, wobbly kitchen table. The wallet was in front of her. Beside it was a pile of bills, an eviction notice, a final demand from the pharmacy, a letter from the hospital outlining the costs of a new experimental treatment. The total was a staggering, impossible number. She picked up the business card. Arthur Ainsworth. She could just mail the wallet. It would be easy, anonymous. Or she could do what Chloe suggested. She could use one of the cards online, just once. Buy the medicine, pay the rent. He was so wealthy he had insurance and fraud protection. He would get it all back. It would be a temporary, victimless crime. She stared at Liam's drawing, taped to the refrigerator. The dragon, so full of freedom and power. It was everything her brother wasn't, everything she wanted him to be. With a surge of resolve, she stood up. She wasn't a thief. Her parents hadn't raised her that way. No matter how broken the world was, she wouldn't let it break her. She would return the wallet, in person. She would walk into that glass tower and hand it back to the man who owned it. It was the right thing to do. And right now, doing the right thing was the only currency she had left. The next morning, Ellie called the diner and told them she had a family emergency, taking an unpaid day she couldn't afford. She put on her one good outfit, a pair of black slacks that were slightly faded at the knees, and a simple white blouse she'd ironed twice to get the stubborn wrinkles out. She looked in the mirror and saw a tired waitress trying to play dress-up. It would have to do. Wacker Drive was another planet. The buildings weren't just tall, they were monuments to power, scraping a sky that seemed a brighter, cleaner blue than the one over her neighborhood. The Ainsworth Enterprises building was the most imposing of them all, a sheer cliff of black glass and steel that seemed to absorb the sunlight without reflecting any of it. Pushing through the heavy glass doors, she entered a lobby so vast and silent it felt more like a cathedral than an office. The floors were polished Italian marble that mirrored the soaring ceiling. A single monolithic black desk stood in the center, manned by a receptionist who looked like she'd been sculpted from ice. Ellie's worn-out flats squeaked softly on the marble, an embarrassingly loud sound in the cavernous silence. She approached the desk, her heart thumping against her ribs. "Excuse me," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm here to see Mr. Ainsworth." The receptionist, whose nameplate read Cynthia, looked up from her computer. Her eyes, a cold, dismissive blue, scanned Ellie from head to toe, taking in the cheap blouse and the nervous way she clutched her worn handbag. The judgment was instantaneous and absolute. "Do you have an appointment?" Cynthia asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "No, I don't, but it's important. I found something that belongs to him." Ellie held up the black leather wallet. Cynthia's expression didn't soften. "Mr. Ainsworth does not take unscheduled appointments. You can leave the item with me. I will see that it gets to his executive assistant." Ellie hesitated. She had come all this way. She felt a strange, stubborn need to deliver it to him personally, to close the loop on this bizarre chapter. "I'd really prefer to give it to him myself. I'm sure he'll want to see me." A thin, cruel smile touched Cynthia's lips. "I'm sure he won't. Now, if you'll leave the wallet, I have work to do." Frustration and humiliation warred within Ellie. She was being dismissed like a piece of trash, and it was hardening her resolve. "Could you at least call his assistant and tell them that Eleanor Vance from the Silver Spoon Diner is here to return his wallet?" Cynthia sighed, a dramatic put-upon sound. "Fine." She tapped a few keys, then spoke into her headset, her voice syrupy sweet. "Veronica, my apologies for the interruption. There's a woman here in the lobby, an Eleanor Vance. She claims to have Mr. Ainsworth's wallet." She paused, listening. "Yes, from a diner." "I know, very well." She looked back at Ellie, her face a mask of smug satisfaction. "Ms. Sterling, Mr. Ainsworth's executive assistant, is extremely busy. She will be down to collect the item when she has a moment. You can wait over there." She gestured vaguely towards a set of hard, uncomfortable-looking leather chairs. Ellie retreated to the waiting area, feeling the weight of every condescending stare from the impeccably dressed people striding through the lobby. 20 minutes crawled by, then 30. She was being deliberately ignored, left to stew in her own insignificance. Just as she was about to give up and leave the wallet at the desk, a woman with sharp features and a perfectly tailored gray suit clicked across the marble floor towards her. "Eleanor Vance?" the woman asked, her voice as crisp and starched as her suit. This had to be Veronica Sterling. "Yes, that's me," Ellie said, standing up. "You have something for Mr. Ainsworth?" Veronica held out a perfectly manicured hand, not even making eye contact. The gesture was clear. "Hand it over and be gone." But Ellie held on to the wallet. "I want to give it to him." Veronica finally looked at her, her eyes scanning Ellie with the same dismissive air as the receptionist. "That's not possible. Mr. Ainsworth is in a board meeting that will last the rest of the day. Now the wallet, please." An argument was brewing on Ellie's tongue when a deep, familiar voice cut through the tension. "That won't be necessary, Veronica." Both women turned. Stepping out of a private, unmarked elevator was Arthur Ainsworth himself. He was dressed not in a suit, but in a simple cashmere sweater and dark trousers. He looked directly at Ellie, and for the first time she saw a hint of a smile in his eyes. "Mr. Ainsworth," Veronica stammered, her composure shattering. I thought you were in the Q3 planning session." "I was," he said, his voice calm, but carrying an undeniable authority that made the air crackle. "I decided it was boring." He turned his full attention to Ellie, ignoring his flustered assistant. Ms. Vance, thank you for coming all this way. You're welcome, Ellie managed, holding out the wallet. You left this at the diner yesterday. He took it from her, his fingers brushing hers for a brief moment. So I did. I was hoping you would find it. Please come with me. He turned and walked back towards the private elevator, expecting her to follow. Veronica's jaw was practically on the floor. Ellie shot her a triumphant, albeit terrified glance, and hurried to catch up. The elevator was silent and swift, ascending without a sound. It opened directly into a sprawling corner office that seemed to occupy half the floor. The walls were glass, offering a breathtaking, panoramic view of the city and Lake Michigan. Space was minimalist and immaculate, furnished with classic Eames chairs and a single massive desk made from a slab of polished walnut. It was a room that screamed power, yet felt deeply personal. Please have a seat, Arthur said, gesturing to one of the chairs facing his desk. He walked over to a small hidden bar and poured 2 glasses of water. I want to apologize for the reception you received downstairs, he said, handing her a glass. Sometimes our security protocols can be overzealous. It's fine, Ellie said, though it wasn't. He sat down opposite her, placing the wallet on the desk between them. I left it on purpose, you know. Ellie's heart skipped a beat. You did? Yes, he confirmed. I've been looking for something, for someone. I've grown weary of the people who surround me. They tell me what they think I want to hear. They agree with everything I say. They want something from me. I wanted to find someone genuine, someone with character. He leaned forward slightly. I've been visiting diners, coffee shops, bus stations for weeks, just watching. And yesterday at the Silver Spoon, I saw you. I saw you handle that obnoxious man, Mr. Henderson, with grace. I saw you comfort your coworker. And then, I saw you pay for Mrs. Gable's meal with what was probably your own grocery money. Ellie blushed, stunned that he had noticed all of that. That was an act of pure, unrewarded kindness, he continued. But kindness can be fleeting. Integrity is harder to find. So, I left the wallet, a test if you will. There was enough cash to be a small temptation, and credit cards that represented a much larger one. You could have taken it, you could have used it, you could have mailed it back anonymously, but you didn't. You took time off from a job you clearly need, spent money on a bus fare you probably can't spare, and came to a place that is designed to intimidate people like you, all to do the right thing. He paused, his gaze intense. That is what I was looking for. Ellie didn't know what to say. She felt exposed, as if he had peeled back all her layers and looked directly into her soul. I have a proposition for you, Ms. Vance, he said, his tone shifting from observational to direct. I want you to come and work for me. Ellie stared at him, bewildered. Work for you? Doing what? I'm a waitress. I need a personal assistant for special projects, he said. It's a new position. The responsibilities will be varied. But what I need most is not a particular skill set. It's a perspective. Your perspective. I need someone with integrity, with empathy, someone who remembers what it's like to worry about a $5 bill. He named a salary. The number was so large, so astronomical, that for a moment Ellie thought she had misheard him. It was more than she made in 10 years at the diner. It was enough to pay for all of Liam's treatments, to get them out of their miserable apartment, to fix everything. It was too good to be true. There had to be a catch. Why? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Why me? Arthur Ainsworth leaned back in his chair, his eyes looking out at the city below. Because I'm starting a new venture, something very important to me. And I've learned that when you're building something that matters, you don't start with bricks and mortar. You start by finding a cornerstone, someone solid, someone true. I believe you are that person, Eleanor. The offer hung in the air, shimmering with possibility. It was a lifeline, a winning lottery ticket, a miracle, but it was also terrifying. Could she, Ellie Vance, the tired waitress from the Silver Spoon, really exist in this world of glass and steel? Accepting Arthur Ainsworth's offer felt like stepping off a cliff in the dark, hoping a net would appear. The very next Monday, Ellie found herself standing once again in the intimidating lobby of Ainsworth Enterprises. This time, however, she didn't have to speak to Cynthia. Mr. Ainsworth had arranged for a security pass to be waiting for her. As she swiped the card and the gate clicked open, she saw Veronica Sterling standing by the elevator bank, her expression a perfect mask of professional courtesy that did nothing to hide the simmering resentment in her eyes. "Good morning, Eleanor," Veronica said, her voice sharp and precise. "Mr. Ainsworth asked me to show you to your office and get you started with the onboarding process." "Thank you," Ellie replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The ride up in the main elevator was thick with an uncomfortable silence. Veronica finally broke it. "I'll be frank. I don't understand Mr. Ainsworth's decision. My department spent 3 months vetting candidates for this position, all with MBAs from Harvard and Wharton, and he chose you." She said the last word with a delicate distaste, as if describing something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "He said he needed a different perspective," Ellie offered weakly. "Indeed," Veronica sniffed. "Well, your office is here on the 48th floor, adjacent to the executive suite." The office wasn't just an office. It was larger than Ellie's entire apartment. It had one of the same floor-to-ceiling windows as Mr. Ainsworth's office, with a view that made her stomach swoop. A sleek, minimalist desk was equipped with a brand-new iMac, a multi-line phone system, and a stack of files. "Your primary responsibility for now is to familiarize yourself with these," Veronica said, tapping a perfectly lacquered fingernail on the files. "They concern preliminary research for a new philanthropic venture. Mr. Ainsworth will brief you himself on the details of the special project when he is ready. In the meantime, you'll report directly to me for administrative purposes. Any questions about HR, payroll, or basic company procedure should be directed to my inbox." The subtext was clear. Don't bother Mr. Ainsworth with your trivial problems. The first few days were a blur of overwhelming culture shock. The corporate jargon, the endless acronyms, the sheer pace of everything was dizzying. People moved through the hallways with a swift, silent purpose, speaking in hushed tones. Whispers followed Ellie everywhere she went. She was the waitress, the diner girl, Mr. Ainsworth's strange new pet project. The other executive assistants ignored her, offering tight plastic smiles if she tried to make conversation in the break room. Veronica was her primary tormentor, employing a campaign of subtle sabotage and condescension. She would send Ellie on pointless errands to the archives in the sub-basement, give her contradictory instructions, or accidentally leave her off important email chains. Every interaction was designed to remind Ellie that she was an outsider, an imposter who didn't belong. But then on Friday, her first paycheck was direct deposited into her bank account. Ellie checked her balance on her phone during her lunch break, hiding in a bathroom stall to avoid the prying eyes in the corporate cafeteria. When she saw the number, she gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It was real. After taxes, it was still a life-altering amount of money. That evening, she didn't take the bus. She took a taxi. She walked into the pharmacy, past the long line of people waiting to haggle with their insurance, and paid for Liam's entire month of medication in cash. Then she went to the grocery store and bought everything she'd always wanted to. Fresh salmon, organic vegetables, a carton of real orange juice instead of the concentrate, and a huge, ridiculously expensive chocolate cake just because she could. When Liam saw the spread on their tiny kitchen table, his eyes went wide. "Whoa! Did you win the lottery?" Ellie laughed, a real, genuine laugh for the first time in what felt like years. "Something like that, buddy. I got a new job." The relief was a physical sensation, like a heavy cloak being lifted from her shoulders. For the first time, she could breathe. The whispers and the condescending stares at the office didn't matter. Veronica's petty games didn't matter. All that mattered was Liam's smile as he devoured a piece of cake, a smudge of chocolate on his cheek. This was why she was doing it. This made it all worth it. The following week, Mr. Ainsworth called her into his office. "How are you settling in, Eleanor?" he asked, his expression kind. "It's a lot to take in," she admitted. "Veronica has been showing me the ropes." She chose her words carefully, not wanting to sound like a complainer. A knowing look passed over Arthur's face. Veronica is exceptionally efficient, but her methods can be rigid. Don't pay her any mind. I brought you here for your instincts, not your ability to file paperwork. He gestured for her to sit, his demeanor turning serious. It's time I told you what this is all about. The special project. He swiveled his chair to look out at the city. 2 years ago, I lost my wife, Isabella. It wasn't sudden. It was a long, difficult illness. We spent years in and out of hospitals, seeing the best doctors in the world. But what I remember most from that time isn't the doctors. It's the other families. The parents with sick children, sleeping on vinyl chairs in waiting rooms, their faces etched with a fear and exhaustion I knew all too well. His voice was quiet, filled with a profound sadness. Isabella loved children. We were never able to have our own. Before she died, she made me promise that I would use our resources to do something for them. Not just write a check, but build something meaningful. He turned back to Ellie, his eyes locking on hers. I'm liquidating several of my tech holdings to endow a new foundation, the Isabella Ainsworth Foundation. Its first and only mission will be to build and operate a new state-of-the-art pediatric care wing at Chicago General Hospital. It will be a place that treats not just the illness, but the child and the family. It will have the best technology, the best doctors, and it will be accessible to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. Ellie sat in stunned silence, a lump forming in her throat. A pediatric care wing for children with serious illnesses. It was as if he had reached into her deepest, most private anxieties and offered a solution. The files Veronica gave you, he continued, are initial proposals from architects and medical consultants. They're cold, clinical documents full of budgets and blueprints. They're missing a heart. That's where you come in. I want you to be the heart of this project. I want you to read through every proposal, visit every site, and speak to every consultant, and you will tell me what they're missing. You know what it's like. You understand the fear, the exhaustion, the small details that make an unbearable situation just a little more human. Your job, Eleanor, is to be the advocate for the families this wing will serve. Tears welled in Ellie's eyes. This wasn't just a job. It was a purpose. It was a chance to turn her own family's pain into something positive, something that could help hundreds of children like Liam. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything, Arthur replied gently. Just do what you do best. Be kind, be honest, and don't be afraid to tell these million-dollar consultants when they're wrong. As she walked out of his office, clutching a binder filled with blueprints and medical jargon, she felt a seismic shift within herself. She wasn't the waitress anymore. She wasn't an imposter. She was Eleanor Vance, and she had a vital job to do. The whispers in the hallway suddenly seemed very, very small. Ellie dove into the Isabella project with a fervor that stunned everyone, most of all Veronica. The girl who had looked so lost and out of place just weeks ago was now a woman with a mission. She spent her days poring over architectural plans, her nights researching pediatric care philosophies, and her weekends talking to nurses, social workers, and, most importantly, families with sick children. She quickly realized Arthur was right. The proposals were sterile and impersonal. One high-profile architectural firm had designed a waiting room that was a sleek, modernist marvel of concrete and glass. It had won design awards in theory, but Ellie knew instantly it was wrong. She scheduled a meeting with the lead architect, a man named Julian Croft, who arrived with an air of untouchable creative genius. They were joined by Arthur and Veronica in the main boardroom. Mr. Croft, Ellie began, her voice steady despite her nervousness, your design is beautiful, but it's also cold. The chairs are hard, the lighting is harsh, and there's nowhere for a frightened child to hide or a parent to collapse in private for a moment. Croft looked at her with thinly veiled disdain. It's a minimalist aesthetic, designed to promote a sense of calm and order. It's designed by someone who has never spent 12 straight hours in a hospital waiting room, Ellie countered, her voice gaining strength. These families don't need a museum. They need comfort. They need soft chairs, warm lighting, private nooks. They need a play area that isn't an afterthought in a corner. They need charging stations for their phones, a coffee machine that works, and maybe a small library. They need a space that feels less like a clinic and more like a refuge. Veronica shot her a look that screamed, "How dare you?" But Arthur remained silent, watching the exchange intently. "My design is based on decades of architectural principles," Croft said haughtily. "And my feedback is based on years of lived experience," Ellie replied firmly. "Ask any parent in the cancer ward if they'd rather have polished concrete or a comfortable sofa to sleep on." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Arthur spoke. "She's right, Julian. Redo it. I want you to work directly with Ms. Vance on a new concept. Her vision is now your vision." The look of pure shock on Julian Croft's face and the flash of fury on Veronica's was a small, satisfying victory for Ellie. It was the moment she realized her voice mattered here. Her influence grew. She vetoed a proposal for a centralized nursing station because it was too far from the patient's rooms, advocating for smaller, more intimate hubs. She insisted on rooms with large windows and comfortable sleeper sofas for parents. She even designed a bravery bead program she'd read about, where children would receive a unique bead for every procedure they endured, a tangible way to honor their courage. Arthur was delighted. He began to treat her less like an employee and more like a confidant. He would call her into his office to talk, not just about the project, but about life. He told her stories about Isabella, her laugh, her passion for gardening, her unwavering optimism. He listened intently as Ellie spoke about Liam, about her deferred dreams of being an artist. One afternoon, he saw her doodling on a notepad during a meeting, a quick, expressive sketch of a child looking out a hospital window. "You're very talented," he said quietly after the meeting had concluded. Ellie blushed. "I used to draw, a long time ago." "You should start again," he said. "A gift like that shouldn't be wasted." Their growing bond was not lost on Veronica Sterling. To her, Ellie wasn't just an unqualified upstart. She was a threat. She was usurping Veronica's position as Arthur's most trusted advisor, a role she had spent a decade meticulously cultivating. The fact that Arthur seemed to genuinely respect and admire this waitress was an insult she could not tolerate. Her jealousy festered, curdling into a dark resolve. She had to get rid of Eleanor Vance, and she knew just how to do it. The plan began subtly. A crucial file would go missing from Ellie's desk, only to reappear after a deadline had passed. An important meeting would be accidentally scheduled at the same time as a mandatory HR training Ellie had to attend. They were small inconveniences, designed to make Ellie look incompetent and disorganized. Ellie, however, was used to juggling a dozen things at once. She started making her own copies of important documents and double-checking every calendar invite. She was frustratingly resilient. Veronica realized she would need to do something more drastic, something undeniable that would shatter Arthur's faith in his protege. The opportunity came in the form of a major donation. A tech billionaire, an old rival of Arthur's, Marcus Thorne, had pledged $5 million to the Isabella project. The negotiations were delicate and strictly confidential. A leak to the press could jeopardize the deal and cause a major PR nightmare for both companies. Only 4 people had access to the details: Arthur, his chief financial officer, Veronica, and now Ellie. Veronica saw her opening. It was a high-risk, high-reward gambit. She would frame Ellie for leaking the deal, a betrayal so profound that Arthur would have no choice but to fire her in disgrace. She spent a week carefully laying her trap. She created a fake email account, something close enough to a journalist's name to be plausible. Then late one night when the office was empty, she used her master IT privileges, a perk of her senior position, to access the server logs. It took hours, but she managed to spoof an email, making it look as though it had been sent from Ellie's computer to the fake journalist's address. The email contained the sensitive details of Marcus Thorne's donation. To complete the illusion, she needed a motive. Greed was always the most believable. Using the same sophisticated methods, she initiated a wire transfer from a subsidiary foundation account, one with less oversight, to an offshore account. The amount was small but significant, $50,000. She then created a false digital paper trail that seemed to link the transaction to Ellie's workstation IP address. The trap was set. All she had to do was wait for the story to break and then lead Arthur to the devastating evidence she had manufactured. She pictured Ellie's face, the confusion turning to panic and then despair as she was escorted from the building by security. The thought brought a cold, triumphant smile to Veronica's face. The waitress was about to learn a brutal lesson. In this world, you don't get a seat at the table just by being nice. You have to take it. And Veronica was about to take hers back. The news broke on a Wednesday morning. It wasn't a major headline, just a short but damaging piece in a widely read financial blog. Ainsworth and Thorne in secret philanthropic alliance. Sources confirm Thorne's multi-million-dollar buy-in to Ainsworth's pet project, a move that has stunned industry insiders. The fallout was immediate. Arthur's phone began ringing off the hook. Marcus Thorne called, furious about the leak and threatening to pull his donation. The carefully managed announcement was ruined, replaced by speculation and corporate gossip. Arthur was calm, but it was a cold, dangerous calm that everyone at the firm knew to fear. He called an emergency meeting in his office. Only the 4 people with knowledge of the deal were present: Arthur, his CFO David Chen, Veronica, and Ellie. "One of us in this room leaked the details of the Thorne donation," Arthur said, his voice low and hard as granite. "This was a breach of trust of the highest order. I want to know who it was." Ellie's stomach was in knots. She looked around the room, her eyes meeting Veronica's for a brief second. Veronica's expression was one of grave, feigned concern. "I've already had our internal security team run a preliminary audit," Veronica said, stepping forward and placing a file on Arthur's desk. Her voice was laced with manufactured reluctance. "Arthur, I am so sorry. I didn't want to believe it." Arthur opened the file, his face already grim, darkened as he read. He looked up, his gaze falling directly on Ellie. It was a look she had never seen from him before. Cold, questioning, and deeply disappointed. "Eleanor," he said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. "This report shows an email sent from your workstation 2 nights ago to a reporter named Kevin Finch. It contained the exact terms of the deal." Ellie's blood ran cold. "What? That's impossible. I would never. I didn't do that." "The server logs don't lie," Veronica said softly, twisting the knife. "We traced the IP address. It came from your terminal, time-stamped at 10:47 p.m. "I wasn't even here," Ellie protested, her mind racing. "I left at 7. I was at home with my brother." "Can anyone verify that?" Arthur asked, his voice flat. "My brother, he's 10 years old," she stammered, realizing how weak it sounded. Veronica sighed. "There's more," she said, her voice breaking with false emotion. "David, perhaps you should explain." David Chen, a man who typically avoided all conflict, looked deeply uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. We also found a financial irregularity. A wire transfer of $50,000 was made yesterday from the foundation's preliminary expense account to an untraceable offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The digital signature for the transfer also originated from your workstation, Eleanor. The accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. A leak, embezzlement. It was a perfectly constructed narrative of betrayal. The kind, simple girl he had trusted had been corrupted by money and access, just like everyone else. "I didn't do it," Ellie whispered, tears springing to her eyes. She felt the walls closing in. This was a nightmare. "Mr. Ainsworth, Arthur, you have to believe me. Why would I do this? After everything you've done for me?" "Perhaps the salary we gave you wasn't enough," Veronica suggested coolly. "Perhaps you saw an opportunity for more." Ellie turned on her, her fear momentarily replaced by a surge of anger. You did this. You've hated me since the day I started." "That's a very serious accusation, Eleanor," Veronica said, feigning shock. "Why would I sabotage a project I've worked so hard on?" "Because you hate that he listens to me. You hate that I'm a part of it." "Enough!" Arthur's voice boomed through the office, silencing them both. He looked at Ellie, and the disappointment in his eyes was like a physical blow. "I trusted you, Eleanor. I brought you into my inner circle. I believed you were different." "I am different," she pleaded. "This is a setup. Please, you have to give me a chance to prove it." Arthur looked down at the file in front of him, at the cold, hard evidence. He looked at Veronica, his loyal, efficient assistant for over a decade. And he looked at Ellie, the waitress he had plucked from obscurity based on a gut feeling. His gut was telling him one thing, but the facts were telling him another. "Security will escort you from the building," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "You are suspended, pending a full investigation. You are not to contact anyone at this company. Hand over your access card and your phone." The words struck Ellie harder than a slap. It was over. Her dream, her brother's future, everything was gone. Two security guards appeared at the door as if on cue, no doubt summoned by Veronica. They looked at her with impersonal pity. As they led her from the office, her mind reeling in shock and despair, she locked eyes with Veronica one last time. Veronica's face was a mask of sympathy, but her eyes were gleaming with cold, absolute triumph. The serpent had struck, and its venom was coursing through every part of Ellie's life, destroying everything it touched. The glass tower, once a symbol of hope, had become her prison, and now her place of execution. Crushed but not broken, Ellie sat in her silent apartment. Despair was a luxury she couldn't afford. Looking at her sleeping brother, Liam, she felt a fire ignite through her fear. She wouldn't let Veronica destroy their future. She had been framed by someone who understood the system, and she would have to use the system to fight back. Her mind raced, grasping for any advantage. She remembered a friendly IT technician, Ben, complaining about the company's redundant backup servers. It was a long shot, but perhaps Veronica's digital trail wasn't as clean as she thought. At the same time, Ellie pieced together the financial fraud. The $50,000 amount was familiar. It matched a legitimate vendor payment she had approved. Veronica must have rerouted the funds. In a desperate gamble, Ellie reached out to Ben, who, disliking Veronica, agreed to dig into the old archives. The proof he found was the smoking gun, server logs showing Veronica had remotely accessed Ellie's computer from an outside location, and then used her high-level privileges to delete the record of that access. It was a clear, undeniable act of sabotage. Armed with a screenshot of the logs, Ellie bypassed security and went directly to Arthur Ainsworth's penthouse. She found him in his study, looking out at the city, the weight of his disappointment palpable. Without a word, she laid the proof on his desk. As he read it, his weary expression hardened into a cold, diamond-hard rage. He hadn't just been wrong, he had been manipulated, his trust used as a weapon. "I am so sorry, Eleanor," he said, his voice low and heavy with regret. "I should have trusted you." The next morning, Veronica was summoned to his office, where she was met not with praise but with irrefutable evidence of her crimes. She was fired immediately, her corporate reign ending in disgrace. In the quiet aftermath, Arthur made Ellie an offer to become the permanent director of the entire Isabella project. But Ellie, empowered by the ordeal, had rediscovered a different dream. With newfound courage, she explained her desire to return to art. Arthur smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." He informed her that the foundation's first act would be to establish the Vance Scholarship for aspiring artists. She would be its first recipient, with her full tuition and expenses covered. He hadn't just given her a job back. He had given her a future she could create herself. Months later, as a healthy Liam played in the new hospital wing, Ellie packed her bags for art school. Her life forever changed not just by a billionaire's wealth, but by the integrity he had sought and the strength she had found within herself. Eleanor's story is a powerful reminder that our true worth isn't measured by our job title or our bank account, but by the integrity we show when no one is watching. It shows that kindness is not a weakness, but a quiet strength that can change the world, one small act at a time. Arthur Ainsworth had all the money in the world, but he knew that true value lies in a person's character. In the end, he didn't just save Ellie from her circumstances. She saved him from his cynicism, reminding him that genuine goodness still exists. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need a reminder that their actions matter. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true life stories that will inspire and move you. What did you think of Ellie's test? Let us know in the comments below.